Hello and welcome to the tutorial on how to create an extended time test copy for students with disabilities. Step 1 is to create a copy of the test. Step 2 is to deploy this test copy in the course content area. Step 3 is to create two student groups in the class. One which contains students which require a regular time on the test, and a second group which is going to be the extended time group. And then step 4 is to apply the adaptive release settings on the two test copies and make them available to the respective student groups. So the first step is to create a copy of the test. For this, go into your course and under the control panel, go to course tools. In the very bottom you have test, surveys and pools. Once you hit the test, surveys and pools, go under tests. Under the tests, you see that you have a test that is already deployed, which is test 1. You would need to make a copy of this test. So for this, go to these drop down arrows, action item arrows, and click on it and go to the option copy. Once you do that, you will see that a second test has been created which is called test 1 and then 1 in parentheses. This is the copied test. Now the second step is to deploy this test copy. To do that, go to your content area, tests and assessments. Once you're there, you see the test 1 is already there. Now you would put in the test 1 parentheses 1. You will go to assessments, tests, and you see that the second test will come in the list. So you select that and hit submit. You can also rename it something better by going into the drop down arrow and going to edit the test, and then go to the stop where you see the name of the test. You can go to the drop down and hit edit, and you can call it test 1 and parentheses A. Make sure that you do not use any terms like ADA or SDS in which the student's identity may be revealed. So just either call it test 1A or test 1 extended. Make sure that the student's identity is not revealed. Hit submit after you've renamed the test. Now you can go back to the test and assessments content area where you've deployed it, and you see that now we have two tests, test 1 and test 1A. Now we will go to our third step, which is to create the two groups, one regular and one extended. In order to do that, you go again to your course, go to control panel. Under control panel, go to users and groups. In users and groups, go to groups. When you're in the groups, you have the option of creating a single group. Select that and go to manual enroll. You can call this group regular. Once, if you scroll down, you can keep these either selected or unchecked as per your requirement. For right now, I'm going to just leave them what they were by default and go to membership. Under membership, I'm going to select the students that I want to be in the regular group. So I'm going to select every student other than test OMO and move them to the right side by pressing this right side arrow. Once everything has been selected, except for the students that require extended time, all these students become a part of the regular group, and I will go in and hit submit. Now I'm going to create the second group, which is going to be the extended time group. Again, the same thing, go to create single group, go to manual enroll and call this extended. Similarly, go down till you reach membership and select the student that you want to be in the extended group. So in this case it is OMO test. Select that and hit the right arrow to make it to select that item and hit submit. Now we see that two groups have been created, extended and regular. If you go to these drop down arrows and you hit open, you would see that it lists the group members in this. In this case, the extended group contains test OMO. Once these groups have been created, the next step is to apply the adaptive release settings for the test. I will go back to the content area where the tests are deployed, and I will go to the first test, which is test 1, and go to edit the test options. In this case, the test is for 1 hour, which is fine. You hit submit. Now I'm going to go to the test 1A and increase the number of minutes for this test, and typically you give at time and a half. So if it's a 1 hour test, you give 1 hour and 30 minutes to the extended time group. Again, we'll go to edit test options and then scroll down, set the timer and change this to 1 hour and 30 minutes and hit submit. Now the next is to go in and change the adaptive release or set the adaptive release. In the first test, you go down to the drop down arrows and go to adaptive release. Leave everything that comes by default. Just go to the second part, which is membership, and select regular under course groups and hit the right arrow and leave everything else by default and hit submit. It is going to ask you, it has a date, you can just hit OK. So now you see that adaptive release has been enabled for test 1, and this test is going to be available only to students who are in the group called regular. Now for the second test, we will do the same thing. We will go to adaptive release from the drop down arrows and select under membership, select extended and hit the right arrow and then hit submit on the bottom right. And now we see that the adaptive release has been enabled in test 1A as well. With this, the test 1 will be available to students that are in the group called regular, whereas test 1A will be available to students which are in the group called extended. And test 1A will have a time and a half, whereas test 1 will have just 1 hour, which is going to be for every other student in the class. So once the two tests have been created, now you need to make a few changes in your grade center. Because we know as and when you create a test, a separate column is created in the grade center. So you will go to your grade center, go to full grade center, and you will see that there are two separate test columns, one for test 1 and one for test 1A. You scroll to the very right and you see two columns, test 1 and test 1A. We need to make sure that we hide the test 1A column from the students. So we will go to the drop down arrows from the column and go to show hide to users. We click on that, it will get a red mark, which basically means that this particular test column is hidden from the students. What will happen when test OMO, which uses the extended time test, takes the test, his score will be in this column, that is test 1A, whereas everybody else's score will be in test 1. At the end, when all students have taken the test, you will manually copy test OMO's score from test 1A to test 1 column, and you will exempt the grade from test 1A column for test OMO. With this, everybody's grade will then be in test 1, and you don't have to bother about anything else in the total or in any other grades center calculations. This is how we create an extended time test copy in Blackboard for students with a disability or which require an extended time for any other reason. Thank you.